Good morning. So today is Yud Zayin Shvat, Tov Shvat, and I want to dedicate the shiur to my grandson Gavriel Shlomo that turned 4 today, and he should have a good year, Begashmis uBeruchnius. We are on page Reish Chaf Daled, Reish Chaf Daled, which is Kuf Samech Ches in the old edition, where it says, "Kehine kol ma shenidcheku hamekubalim harishonim lomar." We have been learning about the view of the Ramak of the term Ein Sof and why only Atzmus Umahus itself is the only one that can be called Ein Sof for two reasons. One is when the Rebbe Rashab explained how the term Ein Sof, on the first level of explanation, Ein Sof means there's no gvul, there's no end to his pashtus. And the Rebbe explains how this only applies to Atzmus Umahus, that has no beginning as well, and therefore has no end to it, really has no end to his pashtus as well. And then we explained the deeper explanation that the inyan of Ein Sof is bli gvul mamash, meaning that you cannot describe him at all by any description, not by positive description, meaning what he is, not by negative expression, description, meaning what he's not. He's not in the realm of gvul, he's not in the realm of bli gvul, shlila sachiyuv, shlila sashlila. All this we explain that is the reason why the Ramak holds that nothing besides Atzmus Umahus, God himself, can be called Ein Sof. I want to go back a little bit to the previous page, page Chav Gimel, which is still the beginning of Kuf Samech Ches by Yehush Turner, if you still you are using the old edition. At the end of the 7 line from the bottom. And I want to deepen this discussion, especially in the light of the fact that the Basil Legani that we are learning this year, which most of us are focused on Tafshin Chavav 66, the Rebbe's review on Oistes Zayin, and the Rebbe there brings the Samech Vov here that we are learning. And especially he brings it up Shabbos after Basil Legani, then after Yud Shvat, when the Rebbe really continued, if you can say so, the biur on Basil Legani Oistes Zayin. He continued Shabbos after Beshalach. We are here in Beshalach also, and he brings us back to what we are learning here in Samech Vov. And the main topic will be today Metziuso Miatzmuso, and we will explain it and we'll try B'ezrat Hashem to deepen our understanding in this subject under the guidance of the book of Rabbi Gopin in Mirz Hashem. Now, all this, the kol ze, says the Rebbe, eino shayach rak b'vchinas ha'atzmus mamash. All this, which means explaining really what Ein Sof means, is shayach, meaning sai in terms of its manifestation, that they can be really Ein Sof only if ein lo tchila, if it has no beginning, and that is only so regarding Atzmus Umahus, and also in terms of Ein Sof, meaning that which cannot be described by anything, because he is not anything and he is not anything. In any case, all this, the Rebbe says, "Ein lo shayach rak b'bchinas ha'atzmus mamash." All this applies only to atzmus mamash. Shemetziuso mi'atzmuso. That his existence is of his own, shehu ha'nimtza ha'amiti, that he is the true existence, she'eino b'bchinas metzius nimtza. That he is not in an existential existence. Existential, he is not an existential entity, the way we would define existence. And here I want to deepen our discussion. שמציוסו מעצמוסו שהוא הנמצא האמיתי. And so today will be mostly explanation rather than covering ground. But we will review again the end of this paragraph. So, now let's look at it a little bit. Let's do some isboinenus. Since the metzius of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is different than the existence of everything else. In what? As the Rebbe just defined, metziuso me'atzmuso. The metzius, the existence of Hashem, is me'atzmo, is of himself, and no one and nothing else made him. Mimele, so automatically, he is what we call mechuyav hametzius. He is a must, meaning that his existence is a must, is mechuyav, and it cannot be any other way that he exists. And he is also called, so one thing we call him is mechuyav hametzius, that he has to exist. This is a metzius, it's existence that must be. Not every existence must be, but his existence must be. Okay. Then we call it his existence also metzius amitis, a true metzius, a true existence. This is contrary to the divine, to the world, to the created beings. And even different from all the higher divine levels, the highest, and even Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, we cannot call it Metzius Amitis yet. Why? Because everything but God himself, including Or Ein Sof and even Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, their metzius is not me'atzmusam. Their metzius is not from their own. Rather, depends on the metzius of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who makes them, or emanates them, or generates them, or creates them. When he wills, he emanates them and they exist. And if he doesn't, or when he wills not, then they cease to exist. And Hashem can emanate and not emanate. And since emes, which means truth, is something that never changes, from this you can understand already that any metzius, any existence that can change or stop is not defined as an absolute existence, as a true, infinite or eternal or absolute existence. So the first thing that the Rebbe is saying here in the text is shemitziuso me'atzmuso, that Hashem exists of himself, shehu hanimsa ha'amiti, and we will analyze it more soon, that he is what we call the true existence, nimtza amiti. But when we say that he is the nimtza amiti, that he is the true existence, look inside, she'eino bivchinas metzius nimtza, that he is not in a manner of an existential metzius, as that he is not an existential entity. His existence is non-existential. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. So this metzius amitis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this true existence, what we call he is the true existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Gedol Yisrael call it, and headed by the Rambam, with the term Bilti Metzius Nimtza. Bilti Metzius Nimtza. It's a non-existential, he exists in a non-existential way. Bilti Metzius Nimtza. He is not a found existence. He is not a existence that exists. And we will define what it means. Retzonol, simply it means, okay, now let's read one more line, and then we go into the depths of this explanation, which I brought up in the past, that when we say, or when the Rebbe says, that Hashem is the Eino b'vchinas metzius nimtza, that Hashem's existence is not non-existential, Retzono lomar, so the Rebbe Rashab said that he wants to say, and the Ramak says also, means, Shehu nimsa lo b'vchinas metzius, that Hashem is, but in a non-existential way. So what does it mean? Bepashtus, explains Rabbi Agopin, the intention is to say, when the Mekubalim say that he is not in Metzius Nimtza, the Rambam says, not as a Mekubal, that he is not in a manner of Metzius Nimtza. So the simple explanation is that all the Nivraim, everything else but God, his Metzius Nimtza, is an existential entity, and they are what is called Nimtzaim, they exist. What does it mean, exist, Metzius or Metzia? It means that something doesn't exist, and then it exists. That's what Metzius means. The word Metzius means that it preceded by non-existence, and then it becomes an existence. It's a yesh, what we call it. It exists, versus non-existing. So all the Nivaim, everything else but God, is in a category of Metzius Nimtza, of existential existence, which means that it is preceded by non-existence, and then Hashem makes it exist. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the other hand, is Bilti Metzius Nimtza, which means you can't explain his presence as a Nimtza. Why? Because Nimtza, we just defined that Nimtza means, exists means that it preceded by non-existence, and then it exists. That's what defines Metzius, existence. Hashem always was. So he's not preceded by non-existence. And therefore, his Metzius is Metzius Amitis, as defined. He is a true Metzius that always was, and not a new Metzius that came to be. Right? That's Hashem. So what can you... But then the Rebbe says, well, take it a step deeper. Retzono lomar, really it means to say, שהוא נמצא לא בבחינת מציאות, that he is not in an existential way. So what does it mean? According to the simple meaning that we presented before, the difference between the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the existence of the Nivraim, of the existence of worlds, is really in the stage of coming to existence. Meaning the Nivraim, everything else but God, all the created beings, or emanated, created here, that we don't distinguish. Anything that's made by God, one way or another. First they were not, and then they came to be. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu always was. And he doesn't exist only from a certain point, because he always was. But from this perspective, take it relatively to the time that things exist. Okay, the Nivraim didn't always exist, at least theoretically. They always have a cause, and therefore they didn't always exist by default. Hashem always existed. Fine. But you can say, from one view, a more superficial view, that okay, Hashem always was there. Everything else came to existence. But once everything else came to existence, now it's like Hashem. They both exist. And that would make sense. That until they came to be, okay, there's a big difference between them, their Metzius, and Hashem Metzius, because Hashem is there and they are not. But after they come to be, they are the same like Hashem. They exist and they exist. And the Rebbe says, no. You have to, so no lomar, what it means to say that not, according to this view, once everything else exists, there is no difference between the Metzius of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Metzius of the rest of the Nivraim, once they exist. And the Rebbe says, no. This is the Chidush here. The Chidush here is that the difference is also after this Havus, after everything came to be. The Nivraim are called Metzius, even after they exist. The Nivraim are called Metzius versus non-Metzius. Hashem, even now, is not Bevchinas Metzius. Even now, he is non-existential. We will explain. So it's not that since they exist like him, and he always was, but the difference only when they came into the picture. It's not just that. Even after they came into the picture, their existence is very infinitely different than his existence, because his existence is even now non-existential. And we will explain B'ezrat Hashem. To explain it, now we are going deeper into that with Rabbi Gopin's help. To explain the difference between the Metzius of the Nivraim and Hashem's Metzius, which is lo bevchinas Metzius, is non-existential, we have to analyze more, to reflect more on the concept of what Metzius is, what existence is. First of all, there are different kinds of Metzius. There is Metzius Elokis, a divine Metzius. There is a spiritual Metzius. We'll explain everything, B'ezrat Hashem. There is the spiritual of the physical. We will give examples. And there is the physical Metzius. So there are different kinds of Metzius, of existences. So let's start from the lowest. You take a Metzius Gashmis, a physical Metzius. It takes physical space. And this is true throughout all physical Nivraim, physical creations, from the lowest inanimate to the highest Medaber, to the highest human. Every physical existence takes physical space. Then you go to the Ruchnius of Gashmius, more the refined aspect of Gashmius, which is like the sound that you hear. It's still physical, but not as physical and doesn't take space as a physical body, or the looks of something, or the smell of something. It is much lighter kind of space. It's not as physical space as as a rock or as a body. And it doesn't take physical space, but it's still perceived through the senses, the physical senses of the person. This is Ruchnius Shebegashmius, existence. Then take Ruchnius existence, like Sechel, Nefesh, intellect. This is existence that doesn't take physical space and is not perceived and sensed through the senses, the physical senses of the person. Nevertheless, it's a metzius that takes spiritual space. And for instance, different assumptions or theories, like 2 plus 2 equals 4. It has a meaning, it has a tochen, a content to it. This is a intellectual or logical metzius, logical existence that has a meaning and takes a spiritual space. And if you say that 2 plus 2 is 5 equals 5, then this is not a metzius sichlis, this is not considered a legitimate metzius, and therefore doesn't take any space, not even spiritual space. It's not considered logical metzius. And in that, in the realm of intellect, there are many levels of svaros, of theories. There are many levels. There's a simple svara that takes a small spiritual space, and there are broad svaros, broad theories throughout Torah, for instance, that take a lot of space in terms of spiritual principles. Klal gadol, big rules, big general principles. Then there is so to speak, the highest relatively metzius existence. What's the highest metzius existence? The highest existence is metzius elokis, divine existence. Let's say in Olam HaAtzilus, the world of Atzilus. How do you define what space? What is the space of divine metzius, divine godly existence? It doesn't take, certainly not physical space, and not even spiritual space. Rather, what is the manner of existence of a divine metzius? A complete bitul to Hashem. That's the nature of existence in Atzilus. Nullification to God. But in that case, the metzius of Atzilus, what measures how much metzius there is how much bitul there is. This is how you measure the truth of the metzius of Atzilus, and that makes it how much is it a keli, a vessel to receive and to contain Gilui Elokus, revelation of godliness. So all these are different definitions or categories of, not definitions, the categories of metzius, of existence. You have metzius gashmis, you have ruchnius shebekashmius, you have ruchnius, and you have even godly metzius, atzilus, that is defined by its bitul. But all these, explains Rabbi Gopin, are only different categories of metzius. These are the elements that make something be considered metzius or not. Begashmius, if it takes physical place, then it's a metzius. And if not, it's not a metzius. Beruchnius, it has to have a content, a meaning. And if not, it doesn't exist. A godly metzius is examined according to the measure of bitul. It's bitul to elokus. And if it doesn't have bitul, it doesn't exist. But even before you define different categories or describe different categories of metzius, whether a metzius, certain metzius exists or doesn't exist, you have to define what metzius is, and we already began doing that. And the answer is that really how do you define what Metzius is, what existence is? The definition of existence is hu nimtza velo lo nimtza, that it exists and not existing. Meaning you're talking about some kind of a form of something that exists, meaning you have to find some kind of a form to it, versus non-existence. This is what Metzius is. That something is rather than that isn't. So what is the Metzius? Metzius is the fact that something exists and not non-existing. And regarding this, they are all the same. Existing versus non-existing, all kinds of existence are the same. Whether it is Gashmi or Ruchni or divine, all existence are sharing the same basic component, so to speak, that makes them exist, that makes them all called existence, that they exist versus, or rather not existing. That's what defines their Metzius. This is the most fundamental thing of Metzius, that it is. Faranen in Yiddish you say, Faran, there it is. And after it exists versus not existing, now you have to see what kind of Metzius it is, what kind of existence it is. Now let's take it, let's not fall asleep and take it a little bit, the magnifying glass closer, okay? All right, so we define what Metzius is. Metzius is something exists. That means that there is a possibility that it shouldn't exist, theoretically at least. That because what defines it, it exists versus not existing. There could be a possibility that it doesn't exist. So anything that exists, we can imagine it also not existing. The truth is, if you put existing and not existing one next to the other, which one is more truthful? Yeah, you're right, non-existing. Metzius and Heder Metzius. You put them one next to the other. Heder Metzius, which means the lack of existence, is more basic and more natural than Metzius itself. Because that's what underlines everything, the lack of existence. Now you want to create something? Okay, so you have to bring something into existence. That's not the natural position of everything. The natural position of everything is not to exist. And Metzius is like a hunch over the back. It's like an addition to non-existence. It's like something grafted on top, came out of non-existence. And therefore we call Metzius Yesh. And not Dafka Yesh in terms of Gaiva or anything like this, of the ego. Yesh in terms of something is exists versus not existed. And this is the meaning, explained Rabbi Goffin, to making it a fact that all aspects except for HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, starting from Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, all the way down after the Tzimtzum to the lowest doimem, inanimate object, they are all in the category of Metzius Nimtza. Because they are Metzius that exist even after they exist, even after they were created, is only because it exists versus not existing. But their truth is not to exist. So everything but God himself that exists, their truth is not to exist. And the fact that they do exist is a chidush, is an innovation out of the natural state. And therefore, they don't have a true existence, which doesn't apply to Asmuso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, there is no possibility, God forbid, that he should not exist, because he always is and was. He is what we called before mechuyav hametzius. He is a must kind of existence, and it cannot be that he doesn't. And therefore, the meaning of Hashem's existence is not negating that he doesn't exist. That doesn't apply to Hashem. It is determining that the Metzius of Hashem is a true Metzius. Why? Because it didn't come as an addition of him not existing. It didn't come of a change of his natural condition of God not to exist, God forbid. He always was. And therefore, Hashem's existence is not an innovation, it's not an addition to anything that they didn't exist. Because he is not existing. He always is. That means really that Hashem's existence is not in relation to anything but himself. And since in the essence of Hashem, a condition of non-existence doesn't apply at all, and his Metzius is not because he exists versus not existing, unlike everything else. Everything else, its existence is because it's not existing. Because its true existence of everything else is not to exist. And then they exist. By Hashem, there is no such thing. He always exists. And therefore, you don't define Hashem Metzius is existing versus non-existing. He always exists. And therefore, he is called Lo Bevchinas Metzius. He is non-existential, the way we exist. Because the we exist is out of non-existence. And the way he exists is always is. And therefore is non-existential, the way we define existence. And by this, Hashem himself is different from all other aspects. From Or and Sof, before the Tzimtzum, at the lowest inanimate in this physical world, everything else is Metzius Nimtza, what we call is existential existence, and was preceded by lack of existence. And it can be that they don't exist, anything and everything. And Memele, their truth is really their lack of existence. Because if they cannot exist, then that's their truth, the ultimate truth. And all of their existence is in addition to that. However, the Asmus of Hashem, Hashem himself, there always was, and therefore cannot be that he will not be. And therefore his Metzius is his natural way. His existence is true and natural, because it is not contradicted by non-existing. And therefore he is called Lo Bevchinas Metzius. He is not in a Metzius that we are used to define as existence, that the view as existence. And a little further, we'll give you a couple of points from Rabbi Yoel alav shalom, how he explained it. I'm not going to do the whole thing because it's going to knock everybody out, but just a little bit. What's the difference, says Rabbi Yoel, between Metzius Nimtza and Bilti Metzius Nimtza? We say everything is Metzius Nimtza, is existential existence, and Hashem is Bilti Metzius Nimtza. He is non-existential. So the difference is, says Rabbi Yoel, in the way you define Metzius. Metzius Nimtza means that the Metzius of every creation is the way it was created, and this is its Metzius. Like water is water, and that's how water was made, that's how water was created, and this is what water is. Fire is fire, and this is what fire is. And so too Chokhmah. Chokhmah was created as a Chokhmah, wisdom, and this is its Metzius. And even Or, even light, even Or and Sof is light. This is what it is. And therefore, all these existences, whether it is water or fire or wisdom or Or and Sof, all these existences, they have no possibility to be other than the way they were existed, the way they were created. So when they were created and came to existence, it was in a certain manner, and this is how they are, and they cannot change it. However, Kadosh Baruch Hu, how are the rabbis call Kadosh Baruch Hu? Metzius bilti metzius nimtza. He is non-existential. What does it mean? That his metzius is not because he is like this, like water is like this, and fire is like that, and wisdom is like that, and bina is like that, and chesed is like that. Everything is like that. Hashem's metzius is not because he is like that, because as we learned already from the Ramak, you can't define him as anything, and you cannot say that he is anything, that he is this or he is that. You cannot say that he is katan or gadol, that he is small or big. You cannot say that he is gashmi or ruchni. You can't say anything about Hashem himself. You cannot say that he is mugbal or bilti mugbal, that he is limited or unlimited. The metzius of Hashem has no definition. So what is the metzius of Hashem? What is the metzius of Hashem? If there is no definition to it, what is the metzius of Hashem? The metzius of Hashem, says Rabbi Yoel, is mashu rotzeh, anything he wants. Meaning, the metzius of Hashem is not what he is. He is not limited to anything. He's not what he is. Rather, what he wants to be. And therefore, all the Nivraim are Metzius Nimtza, because their Metzius is the way that they are existing, and they are existing in a certain way, and there's no other way. This is what defines them. Each one its own Metzius. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not Mugdar, is not defined by any nature, by any categories, by any descriptions, and by any definitions. So what is he? Mashu Rotzeh, what he wants to be. And therefore, he is bilti mitzius nimtza. He is not non-existential, the way everything else exists. Because ein lishlol me'akadosh baruch hu shum davar, as we learned from the Reb Moshe Cordovero, that we cannot negate anything from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We cannot say that he is not this or not that. Nothing. You cannot negate anything from him, because he can be anything and everything. And together with that, he is nothing. You cannot say that he is anything. He is nothing, and you cannot say that he is not anything. So you can't apply any definition of existence, of Metzius, to Hashem. And Davka, if you read inside, Bazeh Davka Shayach Lomar Amitis Inyan Ein Sof Kanal. So there, if you look inside, it says, only in this is Shayach to say the true Inyan of Ein Sof. We are concluding the discussion of the Ramak of what is really, really Ein Sof. And therefore, he didn't agree when the Mekubalim called Keser Ein Sof, because Keser is emanated from God, and he said only God can be Ein Sof. So now it understood that only in the Asmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Shayach to say that he is Ein Sof, because he is the only one that is bilti Metzius Nimtza. Only on something which is bilti Metzius Nimtza, non-existential existence, you can call Ein Sof according to the Ramak, and therefore you can't you can negate any description of him. You can't make him what he is, because he isn't anything that what we define as what is. So בזה יומתק, and with now this will solve the conflict, גם מה שכתוב במקום אחר שאינו שייך לומר בו אין סוף. That some מקובלים says no, Keser we can call אין סוף, but not God. You cannot call God אין סוף because you define him like he has no גבול. You cannot say that he has no גבול, you cannot say anything about him. And the Ramak says no, you can say אין סוף if you define אין סוף correctly. כי אין סוף, מה שכתוב במקום שאין שייך טוב, לפי שאין לתארו, because they say, you cannot call him אין סוף because you cannot describe him. So the Ramak says, אדרבה, with the explanation of the Rashab. On the contrary, שם אין סוף כנ"ל, the term אין סוף, as explained by the Ramak and viewed by the Ramak, הוא עניין שלילת כל התוארים לגמרי. Is negating all the descriptions and definitions entirely. So according to what we explained about Ein Sof in its essence, that it's negating all descriptions, now you can resolve what it says in other places, that you cannot call a God himself Ein Sof, because Ein Sof is a description. But according to what we explained here, Adrabah, Ein Sof is negating all descriptions, and that applies only to the Asmus of Hashem himself, that you can say according to the Ramak that he is the only Ein Sof. Aval, however, bivchinas ha'or, this is regarding God himself. However, when you talk about ha'or, the light, uvechol ma shenetzal mimeno, and anything that is emanated from the light, or anything that is emanated from God. Eino shayach lomar b'chinas ein sof. Anything that was emanated, including the light and anything came off the light, is, you cannot apply the term ein sof to it, b'vchina madrega amitis shebazeh kanal, when you really use the term ein sof correctly. Only on the Asmus of Hashem, that Metziuso me'atzmuso, and its bilti Metzius nimsa, shayach lomar ein sof in truth. Negating gvul, negating bli gvul, shlilas achiyuv, shlilas hashlila, all these things. And any other aspect except from the essence of God, even or ein sof, you cannot call it ein sof in its true definition. In the explanation, I'm just summarizing everything. The explanation to it is that kol metzius yesh, any metzius yesh, even or in sof, that did not exist, that has a source, did not exist, and it became in existence, you can describe what is this existence that came is an addition to not existing. You can describe it. Any existence that became a yesh out of non-existence is describable. Descriptable, how do you say? Describable. You can define it one way or another. Ma'u hayesh hazeh. You can say if it's a gashmius yesh, if it's a spiritual yesh, if it's a divine yesh, if it's a limited yesh, if it's an unlimited yesh, but you can define it. And you cannot say about anything Ein Sof the way the Ramak views it. The only thing that you cannot ask what it is, so anything else but God, you can ask what is it. And you should expect some kind of an answer, because you'll get some kind of a category of a definition of existence. But when it comes to the Asmus of God himself, you cannot ask Mahu, you cannot ask what it is. Because he is not in a gather of Metzius Nimsa. He is not a Yesh. He is non-existential. And therefore we cannot describe him we can only say that he is the true Ein Sof. Pashut betachlis apshitus, completely plain, formless, higher than any descriptions or definitions. And this is the foundation of the Shita of the Ramak. Hasidus will, as we know, the Arizal, and explained by the Alter Rebbe, Hasidus will accept a lot of the Ramak's assumptions and agree with them, but will present a different view on the Or Ein Sof. But right now, this is the summary, this is basically the point of the Shita of the Ramak. Since only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mitziuso mi'atzmuso, or what we called Kadmon, or Ein Lo Tchila, has no beginning, and he is the only one that can create Nivraim Yesh Me'ain, as will be explained further. Therefore, this Ein Sof is only Hashem himself and nothing else. Because only Hashem is a Metzius that is Me'atzmusa, is an existence that is of its own, not caused by anything else. And anything else that exists, its Metzius is not of itself, and therefore it cannot create Yesh Me'ain. And it's not really Ein Sof. To summarize altogether, only about Hashem himself, according to the Ramak, and so far we agree with him, you can say that is Ein Sof in its definition, it's in Mahus. Meaning that only about God you can say that it's Shlilas HaGvul, that you cannot say anything that is associated with Gvul. You cannot say that he is anything that is Bli Gvul. You cannot say that anything that he is, and you cannot say that anything that he isn't. And the reason is because he's the only one that Mitziuso Me'atzmuso. He's the only one that his existence is of himself, and he is Bilti Metzius Nimsa. He is non-existential, meaning his Metzius is not depending on the fact that he exists, because it cannot be that he doesn't. Everything else is Metzius existence. It depends on the fact that it exists versus not existing. Hashem doesn't have this issue. He always was. So existing versus not existing, that doesn't define his existence, because he always was. And all the other existences, they are called Metzius Nimsa, an existential Metzius, meaning that their Metzius is preceded by non-existence. And their Metzius is measured just by the fact that they exist, and they cannot exist as well. And since they have an existence, they also have a definition to their existence. But HaMetzius of Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is not an existence that we are, which is non-existential, therefore there is also no definition to his existence, and he's completely pashut, the atmos pshitus, the atmos plainness and formlessness. This is basically Metziuso mi'atzmuso. We will have another small discussion which is that fact that it's bekoach ha'atzmus, it's in the power of atzmus to create yesh me'ain, to create something that has no relation to its source, in recognition of its source. And then the Rebbe will stop and jump into our view of Or Ein Sof, and then we get to the whole subject of Or Me'ein HaMa'or, and that the Atzmos invested its qualities into the Or, that makes it also in some ways Kadmon, that makes it also able to create Yesh Me'ayin. Be'ezus Hashem.